Welcome to Voices in the River, a show about how we reclaim power through intuition, magic, and community. I'm Rebecca Auman, your pragmatic, devoted witch, and joining me today on the riverbanks is Dr. Smiti Nathan. Okay, so let's stretch, and I lit a candle. Whoops. Whoa. Uh-oh, it went out. Gosh. And what did I spill? Oh, it's wax. Wow. Oh, no. Okay. Gosh, you're going to be really disruptive, I can tell.
Oh,
no. She is a YouTube archaeologist.
Hi, I'm Dr. Smiti Nathan, and I'm an archaeologist. In this video, we're going to explore the archaeology of menstruation.
Now, I didn't know this existed until our producer, Theo Balcomb, met her at a conference for creatives. And after they spoke, Theo sent her the show, and she binged it. And we talk about her work as an archaeologist, how she connects past, present, and future, spices, and ritual, and cats. All right, and then I'm going to shuffle the cards and pull a card from the Mystical Shaman Oracle deck. We'll see what we get. Oh, the medicine wheel.
Interesting.
The medicine wheel is a sacred hoop with the 4 cardinal directions well marked. It represents the cycle of life, the cycles of nature, and the circular pattern of our cosmos. So this is the invitation. To manifest clear blue skies in your life, it is important that you take a look at certain aspects of your being. Enter the medicine wheel from the south and reflect on how you are still clinging to events from the past. Continue to the west and notice which relationships are toxic and drain your energy. Step into the north and ask yourself, do I know my passion, and show it? End at the east direction, visualizing how you want to live the next chapter of your life. I love this because you're an archaeologist. So tell me how you think this relates to your purpose and passion.
You know what? As you were reading the card, archaeology just did not flash in my mind.
What flashed?
Just what's going on in my life right now. Being at a crossroads, honestly. And I wouldn't say a crossroads, actually. Doing something different and overthinking a lot of things. And in listening to your podcast, I was so blown away by this idea of intuition and just really knowing yourself. And I find that sometimes it's really hard for me to tap into that. So when I heard those cardinal directions, Honestly, I love directions. I have a little moss wall art with northeast, southwest.
Oh, I love that.
And honestly, with archaeology as well, I love the directionality. I love looking on the ground before digging into it. So oddly enough, when people say, oh, what's your favorite thing about archaeology? It's not digging. I love surveying. I love walking around. So there's that connection there to the archaeological side. But there's so much to talk about. I don't even know where to begin.
Well, so let's go to the direction piece.
Yes.
So, archaeology sounds so glamorous to me. And so tell me about surveying, digging, what are the components of your work?
So for me personally, I got into archaeology because it just felt like this puzzle that you could never solve. But the point wasn't about solving the puzzle. It was about figuring out the story or the stories there. And so when I started actually studying archaeology, there were different methods. So there's excavation, which honestly, it is fun. I'm not trying to take that away from it. But then when I discovered survey, you got to walk around and roam these landscapes and look for sites, and it didn't feel destructive. It didn't feel as much of a weight as excavation does. Excavation is inherently destructive. You're digging, and once you excavate something, you can't put it back together the way you found it. So that's a trade-off, and it's also something that weighs heavily on me a lot.
How do you differentiate between your scientific academic thinking mind, and you're self-described as an overthinker, and your intuition? Like, does it feel different? Does it come to you differently?
If I'm taking this long to think, probably not. It's not a thing that I can switch on and off. I think the scientific or scholarly side comes through in the rigor. If you tell me something, I want to know.
And so how does intuition weave through that, or does it not?
I think most people who meet me or know me really well would say I'm definitely an overthinker, but there are other decisions that I just go on based on gut feel. And it could be that I've thought about it a lot and I just go for it, but then there's certain pivotal decisions that I've made where I'm just like, I'm just going to do this. This just like feels right. So I'm thinking with YouTube, honestly. People were like, oh, why did you decide to start YouTube? Like, why did you decide to start an archaeology channel? I actually didn't decide to start an archaeology channel. When I started my YouTube channel, the overthinker was there already. Like, I don't know if I can make archaeology videos. This feels really overwhelming, because I knew I had a lot to learn. I had never edited video in my life. Okay, a 60-second Adobe Spark video. Other than that, never edited a video. I never wrote for a video, but there was something in me that was like, just try this out and give yourself 2 years, give yourself space, do this smart. So enroll in a course so someone else can tell you how to, like, what to prioritize, relinquish some of that control and learning, but just go for it.
So Smiti, talk to me a little bit about, in the field, you're a woman of color in academia. You are not sitting in the ivory tower. You have come to the people through YouTube. So let's talk a little bit about the courage that it takes to show up and be seen and bring science to the people.
Well, thank you for asking that. So I will say this idea of going to the people, public archaeology, was part of my thought process of archaeology since my bachelor's. My advisor, he's a white male. He wrote a lot of public-facing pieces. So whether it's through magazine articles and through books or talks. So I got to see him do it. And I also got to see the backlash he got as well, with all the privilege he occupied. So what that meant to me was that it's something I respected and something that I thought was important, but it honestly, as a younger archaeologist, I'm talking like 18 to like 25, it kind of scraped at my sense of security and safety.
Yes.
So while I thought it was important, I thought, okay, I don't think this is something I can do now to be taken seriously. So then when I was knee-deep in graduate school and trying to write my dissertation, I had this conversation in Ethiopia with one of my good friends, kind of my archaeological wife, if she would let me use that term. And we were having this conversation and I was expressing frustration. We do this work. It is interesting. It is important. But how does anyone know about it? Why do we need to wait for a news outlet to pick this up, and then we're frustrated that it's not interpreted well or correctly? I just feel like what I was doing, yeah, maybe it's important, but it just felt very disconnected. So after I finished my PhD, I was going on the hamster wheel of different jobs. I had a postdoc that was very toxic. I was in a workspace that didn't feel toxic at the time, but I reached what they would say a natural ceiling. So I was doing a lot of work, but not getting the recognition or pay.
Yes.
I finally said, okay, I need to stop and I need to heal. And I was very privileged to do so. I have a wonderfully supportive husband and a great therapist who's like, I think it's time, take a pause. And in taking that pause, I wanted to try doing something different.
Hi everyone, this video is a day-by-day breakdown of my 2-week archaeological fieldwork trip to Auman.
So that's when I started to make YouTube videos. And then when I thought about the dream content I wanted to make.
If you're curious to know the real story, or at least my stories, about the coolest thing I've ever found, then let's go back to the beginning.
It wasn't about me just sitting there with my tea and talking to the camera. Honestly, that felt super daunting. I was like, I don't know how to do that. But I wanted to make content on topics in the archaeological record that often people might not think about, but maybe that they could also relate to.
People have been shedding their uterine lining for millennia, but what archaeological evidence do we have of periods and menstruation?
And honestly, if someone's like, oh, your channel is interesting, your topics are kind of weird, I'm like, yes, okay, we're doing it right then.
In this video, we're going to investigate whether ancient Egyptians actually used tampons. So let's get into it.
And that's what inspired me to take this to the people because, I'm not trying to diminish my power when I say this, but even though I've been doing archaeology for 20 years, the past is vast and I have so much to learn still. And that's really exciting and humbling, but it's also a bit daunting and a huge responsibility when people turn to you to be the quote unquote expert. So I try to be a good steward. I try to be a friendly and informed guide. And yeah, I want to reach people that maybe have felt that archaeology wasn't for them. And I think it's working. We have this archaeology group chat with a couple of us who are archaeology YouTubers, and we were sharing our demographic breakdown. And pretty much everyone who shared, I would say 70 to 80% of their viewing audience identified as male.
Oh, wow.
And 70 to 80% of my audience, with the exception of shorts viewers, they identify as female.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for your willingness to be seen and heard, because I think that's powerful, that you're willing to put yourself out there, with actually complex content.
I appreciate that.
And so how do you think about past, present, and future? Because you have your hands in the past often.
Yes. We interpret the record through material culture. And I think I personally, especially in doing my YouTube channel, has stretched the idea of what material culture might mean to me. Some people might say, oh, ancient seeds don't count, texts don't count, but I think it all counts. And for me, I have been interested, I think, always, but especially recently, in kind of the everyday lives of people in the past. And I'm always thinking, okay, well, what did this object mean to someone in the past? How did they actually use it? What did it mean for people?
Is there something from your past that you have now that means something to you? Something somebody would find, they would dig up around your house and they would find, 10,000 years from now, what would it be? I often think about what would represent me 10,000 years from now?
10,000 years. So I'm thinking, okay, what would actually preserve? So I'm assuming a lot of my organic remains, all the teas that I love to drink, all the spices that I have. Well, maybe the spices might preserve because they're in jars.
Oh, I love that idea of, oh gosh, what spice would represent me 10,000? I'm going to change my question to people. They say, what spice would represent you? So what spice represents you right now?
The first thing that comes to mind is black pepper. It's a spice that I hold near and dear to my heart because I am from Kerala, where pepper grows. And that is the one, quote unquote, souvenir that I always bring back with me from India. And also my husband, who's German, who's like, we need the good black pepper. So it's something I decant into jars. I want to preserve it as long as we can. It's something that makes me feel very connected to India because all the black pepper we got are from neighboring family farms or our family farms. And it just makes me feel very connected. And it's also really good. It just tastes different. But it's also that comfort of one of my homes.
Right.
So.
And you're sprinkling a little bit of home.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. So you mentioned to Theo Balcomb, our producer, that Voices in the River had you consider what impact magic or spirituality may have had on people in the past. Mm-hmm. Will you say a little bit about that?
So archaeologists often say, if we don't know what something is, it's ritual.
Oh.
And this is something that has been ingrained in me. It often comes across as a bit of a joke. Oh, we don't know what it is, so it's ritual. But when I was listening to Voices in the River, I was thinking, well, what if it is ritual? It doesn't have to be a big ritual per se. It doesn't have to be a ritual feast, a ritual ceremony, something that feels, very formalized. It got me thinking about the rituals of everyday people in their houses, maybe. What does it mean for someone to light a candle every day? What does it mean for someone to wear something close to them and how they interact with that? What are those things that connect them to magic, their world, ritual?
Well, and it's like black pepper is a ritual for you to sprinkle some of that spice onto your nourishment every day. And you could even say, like, I'm sprinkling joy, I'm sprinkling love, I'm sprinkling spice, I'm sprinkling connection. So I love it like when you stir tea and you cast a little spell when you stir your tea clockwise, setting an intention. Or if you add honey, you're adding sweetness to the collective. Rituals like that.
Yeah.
So will you talk a little bit about any ritual when you were growing up?
So my relationship with spirituality, I would say, is more agnostic.
Yeah.
But I did grow up Hindu, or I would say how my parents practiced Hinduism. And I also grew up with other religions as well. I went to a Methodist preschool in kindergarten. We were taught about Jesus.
Oh, bless your heart. My dad was a Methodist minister.
So, and the thing I really appreciated about growing up Hindu as taught by my parents was that uncertainty was fine. Complexity was fine. It just felt so normalized. I didn't have this desire to know, like, okay, is there just one God or are there many gods?
Yeah.
Because, for example, like when we learned about Jesus, I think my parents explained it. Oh, yeah, it's just one of the gods.
He's just one of them. Yeah.
Exactly. But in growing up Hindu as well, there were a lot of rituals. And I think my parents individually are quite religious. And so there were certain rituals that got passed on that to this day are ingrained in me. For example, this is a bit more niche. I feel very uncomfortable clipping my nails after 6 p.m.
Oh.
To this day. And I think this was something about like, oh, you don't want to wake up the gods. So you don't clip your nails.
So the noise would wake them up.
I think so. And that's the thing. The rationale is very blurry, but the discomfort in clipping any type of nail after 6 p.m. is there. So another ritual is that before you go to any temple, you are supposed to wash yourself, especially if you've eaten meat. And this is something my parents, they weren't super strict about it, but it was something that it was just, we do, that's fine. And what I found funny was when we went to India, there was a bit more flexibility. Oh, you can just wash your feet. And so this ties back to archaeology in a way for me. When I was studying anthropology, cultural anthropology more, there's some trends where if you take a population with certain beliefs and they move somewhere. They might let go of some beliefs, but they also hold on really strongly to some, even if, let's say, the quote unquote like main population has changed their beliefs or adjusted and adapted.
Well, and I think in a lot of spiritual practices, to have a sacred cleansing before you go into any ritual is such a beautiful practice. And I went to the Hindu temple in Taos, New Mexico.
Wow.
And it was probably, I was in my 20s, and it was probably the first time actually I experienced love. I mean, like connected love, because the person, when we came to the temple, what he said to us was, and I had grown up in a very traditional, Methodist, God and Jesus, hellfire, brimstone, and if you don't behave, you will not be loved. And I fell in love with Ganesh. But he said, when we walked in, he was like, if there's not a God for you here, we will make one. And it was like, oh my gosh, there's a God for everybody. There's a path for everybody. There's an opening for all. And I just found that the most beautiful connection, and it opened something for me. Do you call him Ganesh or Ganesha?
There's different names.
Okay.
And it depends where you're from too. What would we say in Malayalam? My mom's this probably like, how did you not know? So all right, we could say Ganesh, Ganesha, or Ganapati. Ganapati feels a little bit more familiar.
Yeah. Well, and then many years later, when I was looking for a home in Portland, Oregon, I'd asked for a little sign about where I should live. And I rented from a Hindu family, and I opened their pantry, and there was floor to ceiling an altar to Ganesh. That altar was my sign.
So I have a painting of Ganapati right up here that my aunt painted. So it's really sweet that you said that.
So I was so fascinated today when I stumbled upon your cat YouTube video. And is it Ancient Felines? I can't tell you how many people I've sent your cat video to. And I was like, oh my gosh, I want to talk about cats, because you talk about witches and cats. Let's talk about cats.
Yes.
Like, what should we tell people about the spirituality of cats?
Like you said, in a parallel in terms of Hinduism, and there might be a god, goddess, or deity for everyone. In researching the video on cats, there's a cat story for everyone. There's so much complexity there. And I'm not trying to diss any other animal.
Right. We'll use cats as a metaphor for any.
Yeah. There were just so many interesting stories that we came across. For example, domestication. I mean, that's if you want to get an archaeologist talking, especially that specializes in plants or animals, say domestication. And with cats, there's this debate. Well, are they truly domesticated? Are they really under human control? And there's, of course, this popular meme culture narrative. It's like, no, the cats, they control us.
Absolutely.
So with cats, and thinking about influence, I think that's the verb I specifically used for that video, and very intentionally.
Yes, the title is Ancient Felines, How House Cats Influenced the Ancient World.
Yeah, I think cats make me think a lot about influence and power and narratives. I don't have a cat myself. I have a kindergartner. And we went to India this past summer. We live on a farm there. And I just remember, he's a city kid. We live in Baltimore. But just seeing him on our farm and interacting with the animals, will pet any cat that comes his way. And the cats allow him to pet them.
Well, and he must be so pure of heart, because, cats don't always come for a pet.
Yeah.
So one of the things, we're looking at is disrupting the narrative of witch, which to me is simply a powerful woman. When you think about it from your perspective, how does witch land with you? Or how do you think about powerful women? Because you've done some incredible YouTube videos, like about menstruation and knitting, even like things that, so it's like women's culture is not always evident It's been othered for a long time. You talk a lot about patriarchy and how do you define a powerful woman? How do you define your own power?
When I think of witch, I think of curiosity. I think of my childhood. I loved books about witches and magic. I think I was a bit more of a fairy person, in all honesty, in middle school and high school. So there's this memory of reading books like a hermit in solitude and being very intrigued by this idea of a witch, because I think they were a powerful woman. But I also didn't feel like I could relate. A lot of the books that I read when I was growing up, the witches didn't look like me. So even though I thought their story was interesting, it was a little hard to connect. And now that's changing. We have so many diverse witchy characters, and I love that. It's so interesting to read a book and feel like, okay, they're more similar to me in a lot of different ways than I could have ever imagined. But I still have such a soft spot for those books and witchiness. And then when I think of a powerful woman, I'm going to make it quite self-centered. When I think of the kind of powerful woman I would like to be, I think of someone who is conscientious, but doesn't let that conscientiousness turn into overthinking. I really appreciate kindness in powerful women, because it's not so much about, I want to control everything. This kind of hyper masculine model of like, let me control this, like I'm powerful over you. There's this phrase that's taken from Black feminist literature, lifting as you climb. I think that's something I really admire and try to strive for as well.
That's beautiful. Is there anything that you'd like to talk about that I haven't asked? Like when you were thinking about being a guest, is there like, I want to say something?
Honestly, no. It wasn't that I wanted to say something. I just really appreciated that there felt really nothing like this. And, I had a conversation with a friend, I think 2 days ago, and she's quite Catholic, and she really turns to her faith often. And just in the last couple months, she was looking outward, like elsewhere. And, unfortunately, she didn't have the greatest experience with other forms of spirituality and, kind of like predicting what's going to happen, being reassured externally. And she was just expressing this frustration where I'm like, I do appreciate my religion, but I also feel that it doesn't satiate certain needs and certain knowing. And, when I looked to these other sources, they gave me this reassurance, but then it wasn't true. And so we started talking about this podcast, and I said, what I really appreciated about this is that it's about not external control per se. It's about tapping into yourself and exploring that. And I just thought this was such an interesting conversation, and all the guests you've had as well. So if I could do anything honestly to contribute to keeping that conversation going, which as a listener and a fan, I felt is important, I was honestly just honored to be asked. And I was like, what am I going to talk about?
Well, thank you so much for being seen and being heard, and for being provocative, and for asking these questions.
Thank you.
You can find Dr. Smiti Nathan on YouTube at Dr. Smiti Smiti Nathan, Nathan. Voices in the River was created by Theo Balcomb. It's produced with help from Sara McCrea. So many of you have shared with us the sentiments that Smiti shares in the ending of the episode about if you could do anything to help advance voices in the river. And it means the world to both Theo Balcomb and me that so many of you say to us, what can we do to advance your mission of the show? And we've created a website, voicesintheriver.com. If you'd like to join there to register to receive our show in your inbox, please do. And we also offer you the opportunity to invest in the show for $33. You can do that at voicesintheriver.com/33. So as we are sharing this episode, it is the end of 2024. What a wild ride. May we enter 2025 with the curiosity and rigor shared by Dr. Smiti Nathan. And as Catherine May said in her episode about winter solstice, we have turned the year. Thank you for joining us on the riverbank.